So someone asked me the other day, what is it like to be a landlord? And, you know, it's, a lot of people think that it's an exhausting situation and that it takes a lot of work. And the truth is, it can take a lot of work and it can be exhausting, or, you know, there's a million ways to skin a cat. And you probably hear me say that a lot because I feel like there are so many ways to get a job done, and you might do it differently than me, than the person next door, than, you know, everyone else out in the streets. But I particularly prefer, so for me, for a long time, I have been my own property manager. And the reason is because I have a really hard time paying that large fee for something that I find to be so simple. Now, if you're the type of person that likes peace of mind, like, no judgment, do whatever you feel suits you. And if you get into, you know, more units than what I have about 50 units right now. So if you get into more than that, then you may want to hire a property manager. I personally, like I said, I can't see cutting my profits that much by cutting in a property manager, so I have decided to manage my properties on my own. And the way that I do that is I have a separate LLC who is the property management company. They're separate from whatever entity owns the building. And if I'm talking over your head right now, just stick with me and I'll explain all of this throughout our journey together. So anyway, I have a separate entity that manages my properties, and that entity comes with its own phone number. So it's separate than my cell phone number, and its own email address, and its own website, all that good stuff. And we have a payment portal, and so a couple rules for me to be able to manage my own things. Couple rules for me. So I don't take any phone calls when it comes to property management. Everything has to be in writing. My tenants know they have to text me. I will not be available to call or, you know, have an argument with or any of that. You have to be able to call me. I mean, text me only. So that's how, because a lot of people are like, how the heck do you even manage 50 units by yourself? And so that's one of the biggest ways is I don't have no one has the ability to call me. Once in a while, if it's a really dire situation or, you know, something that they really need to talk. But I would say that happens less than once a month where I actually speak to a tenant. So everything has to be in writing, and I explain that to them because sometimes they're like, well, I really want to speak to someone and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look, everything has to be in writing. I like to have everything documented in case anything has to get to the level of court. That way I can say what all the conversation was, what was asked, what was, you know, what was the response. I like to have everything documented. That's one of my favorite things in this industry, period, but especially with tenants. So I do not talk to any tenants, only text messages. I will not go knock on anyone's door to collect money. When you become one of my tenants, you have to be able to pay electronically. So we have an online source, and you can go on there and you can pay from your checking account. We actually use some really cool software. It's called, and you can go on there and pay with your credit card, and then there's a charge. There's a 3% charge, I think it is, which, you know, can be significant depending on how much your rent is. But you can also pay through your checking account. So if you wanted to put in a check number or what have you, your checking account information, then it's free. So that's kind of cool. That was actually a real challenge for me in the beginning, was being able to collect rent. A lot of, you know, I've been doing this for a while. So back then, before there was like PayPal and Venmo and all those things, which you could certainly do if you had 1 or 2 units. And, you know, so anyway, they expected me to come knock on the door. People would call me and they'd tell me they have cash. That's another thing. We don't accept any cash. So I'm not going to be knocking on your door. Like, I used to hear about landlords who would go around to all their properties and collect payments, and on the first of the month they'd be walking around with $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 in their pockets. And to me, that's just not smart. I mean, especially because I'm 5'2", 100 and some pounds. Like, I'm soaking wet. Like, I'm little, so I'm not gonna be running around collecting anybody's rent. Plus, who's got the time for that? Like, you know, when your rent is due, click the button and make the payment. That's what I do for all my mortgages. I sit down and I pay them all electronically, and I call it a day. So it's an easy requirement at this point. At first, when I first started asking, there was a lot of pushback from people who would say that they didn't have the ability to pay electronically or whatever. So nowadays, it's no big deal. Everyone has an email address. We do all of our leases electronically. So really, I just need feet on the ground to show the property and then somebody to meet them with the key. And after that, everything is done electronically. So all they know is it's the management company. And then I have somebody who helps me. She's amazing. She helps me write all my letters, and she helps me file court on anybody that hasn't paid. And she's amazing, and she's paid per unit. So it's much cheaper than if I had to bring in a property management company. So I've got somebody that shows units, and then somebody who handles the letters and the leases and the court cases. And like I said, it's a fraction of the cost of what it would be to hire a management company. Now, I am very experienced, and I know all the laws in the state that I live in and that I buy in. If I were to, I do have some other things out of state, and I started to try to manage them myself. They're fairly new, so we'll see how it goes. I'm still managing all of them by myself. I have a couple of other states that I've started to buy in, and I just recently, one of the ones is in Maryland, and the city over there called me, and they were giving me the whole rundown on like what I'm doing wrong, which is fine. They were great. They were great about it, and they're like, oh, we'll work with you. Like, we'll help you figure it out. But they have like extra testing you have to do in order to make it rent ready. Like they test for lead-based paint. So there's all these nuances from state to state. So it's not a bad idea to hire a management company, especially if it's just one or two. But when you have so many and you have to pay, a lot of times I think they charge 10% of the rent. So if a tenant is paying you $1,400 in rent, you're going to owe the management company $140 a month in rent. And when you multiply that times 50, it gets to be really kind of out of hand. So I choose to manage them myself. Like I said, no judgment to anybody that picks a management company. And there's certain situations where I think it's okay to have a management company as well. Like I said, I don't know some of the nuances and that kind of thing in other areas. So you either go through a learning curve where the city is going to post things on your door and call you, and you're going to stress out a little bit until you learn how to figure, what the nuances are, or you're going to call a management company and pay the money. So it depends on the type of person you are. If you like peace of mind, or you'd rather learn everything. I like to learn everything. I don't mind, and nothing's the end of the world. Like they posted this one I'm talking about in Maryland. They posted on the front door and scared the crap out of the tenant. She called me. She's like, they said something's wrong with the house. I'm like, no. There's a language barrier. She only speaks Spanish. So I calmed her down. I'm like, no. They just said I need to pay for a license. And apparently in Maryland, you have to get a lead-based paint test. So I was like, there's nothing wrong with the house. It's fine. But I'm used to stuff like that. So it's going to just depend on your level of annoyance, I guess is the word, or tolerance for the learning curve that may come with managing your own things. Now, on top of that, though, you do get the 8 o'clock at night calls. I had a pipe burst. You have one of my properties recently, there was an altercation between tenants. So the tenant in the back got angry with, there's three tenants in this building. So there's one in the front, one on the side, and one in the back. The tenant in the back was behind on his rent and his electric bill, apparently. So his electric got cut off. And the city that they're in, they'll condemn your unit if you don't have electric. So they came and condemned the unit. So apparently, this particular unit, the unit in the back, actually has 2 stories to it. So there's like a living room and a kitchen on the first floor, and then the second story is where the bedroom is. And when his electric got cut off, his bedroom was still on. His electricity in his bedroom was still on. I didn't know. They're just now telling me this, so we'll have to get it figured out and straightened out. Because it's a 3-unit building. They all have their own meters. When his electric got cut off, there's no reason for his lights to have stayed on. So we'll look into that. But it caused so much drama. So the back unit told the front unit about his lights staying on even though the electric had got cut off. So the front unit decided to tell the middle unit, and the middle unit got irate, and she was like sending all these messages, and they were like mean, nasty messages. And so the guy in the front unit has been there so long, he knows who I am. So he's been texting me directly a long time, and he ended up giving the girl in the second unit my personal cell phone number. So she messaged me, and she's like, we have a huge problem. She's like having a whole fit, and I'm just like, she had my heart racing a little bit, and like had me sort of like triggered, basically, the way she was speaking to me and sort of threatening me. And I have learned after being a landlord for so long that you can't be a bleeding heart. Like I used to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. And I do feel bad. And I am sorry that electric is hooked up incorrectly, but I didn't know. I honestly didn't know until this moment when, actually, I still didn't know. When she texted me, I still didn't know what was going on. I was like, well, does he have it plugged in? Whatever. It took me till the whole next day to figure out what the actual issue was, because she was so emotional. And so that's part of the problem of managing the property yourself, is you're dealing with other people's emotions. And I'm used to that because I help buyers and sellers too, and that gets a very stressful process as well. But it's something different about renters. I don't know if it's like I think they just have a natural disdain for landlords. Even if you have a good rapport with them, even if you've been good to them, I feel like when something goes wrong, they just stress. I don't know why, because they're not responsible. But they will really get upset. So anyway, she was kind of berating me, and I said, we'll get somebody out there as soon as possible to take a look. And I asked for elaboration on the problem. And then I told her she was texting the wrong number and that she should be texting the management company. But anyway, so I told her she was texting the wrong number, and she was like, she just wouldn't stop. She wouldn't calm down. She wouldn't stop. And so I just said, if there's an issue, we're likely going to have to raise your rent, which is true. I mean, if it's found to be that she's saying that she's owed money for her electric bill, then we'll raise her rent and give her the money, I guess. I mean, we'll have to figure it out. I'll talk to my attorney about it. That's another thing. It's really nice to have an attorney on speed dial with any of these situations. If you're going to manage on your own, you definitely want an attorney you can reach out to and just be like, hey, this is an issue I had. Can you tell me, am I doing this right or wrong? Is this within the law? This kind of thing, at least until you learn. But me, I've been doing this a long time, and even I still come up with situations like this situation. I have no idea what the solution is. So I probably will give her a call and sort of run it by her. But in the meantime, I'm going to send the tenant a 60-day non-renew. So in the state that I live in, all of my tenants are month to month, because this is another part about managing by yourself. I feel like if you don't have a good experience with a tenant, you need to be able to get them out right away. And I had a tenant a few years back, this was even before COVID, who, she was awful. She just would complain about everything, and I would send people and pay bills, and she would still just keep complaining. And finally she called the county, which is fine. You're within your right to call the county. But the county they kind of just went into full harassment mode after that. I mean, they sent me like a 4-page document, and then they wouldn't put her out. Like, they kept saying that the unit was awful and that it had to be repaired, but the county has the ability to condemn a unit. They wouldn't condemn the unit. It was just this whole thing. Anyway, maybe I'll do another episode on that. And municipalities, because they're a whole other pain in the butt. But so I started, because of that tenant, I started to do a month-to-month lease. So it's, in my state, you have to give 60 days notice per calendar month. So if you have a tenant that moved in February 24th, or no, if you send the letter on February 24th, the calendar month starts on the 1st. So they would have to be out March 1st, April 1st, by April 31st, they would have to be out if you sent the letter on February 24th. So I prefer that, because if I have an altercation, not a physical altercation, but just a verbal altercation with someone, and it becomes awkward, or if we can't work it out, I think it's just best for a tenant to go. And I manage all my own stuff, and so I know what it's like to get a tenant. I in all my units, I get calls daily. I'm not even advertising for people that need units. So I don't have any issues re-renting anything. I don't worry about that ever. And you can raise rent whenever you want. Like, it's just so many reasons to have, like, not a long-term lease. But some people prefer it. Again, no judgment, of course. Some people like to have a year-long lease. They feel like it's a more secure situation. And I guess it can be. I mean, if you want to sue somebody, if they break their lease, let's say they've been there 6 months and it's a year-long lease, you have the ability to sue them for the amount of time that the apartment was vacant. But in my experience, I've found that suing tenants, and I've sued a lot of tenants, because that's what it's called when you go to search, when you go to get the rent, the back rent, you're basically suing them and you get a judgment. I've found that, most of the time they don't pay. You might be able to get a collection company that will be able to get pennies paid on the dollar, what have you. But for the most part, you're just chasing, they're just never going to pay. Once in a while you get somebody who wants to buy a house, but they stopped looking at judgments. So when you go to buy a house, they don't look at judgments the same as they did, like say 10 years ago. Judgments used to stop you from buying a house, and that's when you used to have to pay those big bills or whatever that were on your actual judgments. They became judgments. They went past your credit and they went into judgments because you got sued. You would have to pay those to buy a house, but now they don't look at judgments like they used to. So it's all different now, and I just find that tenants never pay. So for me, the month-to-month lease makes the most sense, because even if you sue them for whatever amount of rent you lost because they left early, you're still going to be never getting the money. So I'd love to hear from you. Tell me all about your fears and doubts on managing your own properties, or any of your experiences if you had. Feel free to reach out. You can email me at jill@myskyrealty.com, and I would love to hear your feedback on your experiences and your fears, or what's stopping you from moving forward in the investment space. Thanks for listening or watching, whatever you're doing.